Now, if these are the systematic recordings, where is the traceability? The traceability is that which ties everything together. The traceability is that which enables you to transport the data from one place to another place without losing anything. The traceability is here. The traceability is the track. It's that which connects the data. I'm making a point out of this because there is a common misconception about traceability, that traceability means origin. It doesn't. Traceability means the system you use for connecting or keeping track of the data. So, if this wonderful thing called traceability is in this circle, this is a tool, what do we need it for? What can we use it for? I have worked with traceability of food products for roughly 15 years. And certainly the big breakthrough in traceability projects came with the food scandals of the late 90s and the early around 2000. The Belgian dioxin scandal, the mad cow disease, the scabies disease, and so on, because there is a very significant application of traceability in food safety. Having traceable food will not make it safer in itself, but it will help you to trace contamination if something bad has happened. And even more importantly for the industry, if something bad has happened and you need to do a recall, a traceability system is an enormous boon and can make sure that that you don't need to recall products that are not contaminated. In Norway, we had a very bad example of this 2 years ago, where our biggest meat producer recalled and destroyed, I think, 75,000 tons. No, 75. The value was anyway, it was 90 million kroner of recalled and destroyed product, completely unnecessarily. It had never been contaminated, and it couldn't have been contaminated. And if they had the better traceability system, they would not have needed to do the recall. So food safety is an important driver for traceability. Food safety led to legislation, as we've heard something about today. We are all influenced by what's called the Common Food Law. And in the Common Food Law, there are paragraphs requiring traceability, saying you must know who your suppliers are, you must know who your customers are, you must, to some degree, label your product so that recall is facilitated. But legislation is only the minimum level for the industry. Far more important, especially for exporting industry, are the commercial requirements. If you want to sell your fish from Faroe Islands to Marks and Spencer's or Carrefour, you can forget about legislation. The commercial requirements that these supermarkets will give you are far stricter and will force you to record and give them a lot more data than what's required in the legislation. There are various standards there. BRC is one of the most common one. That's British Retail Council. That's International Food Standard. There's ISO standards and so on. But I won't go into this in too much detail here. Now, this left-hand side is really the threat or risk side of traceability. If you're doing traceability for these reasons, you're doing it to reduce risk or to avoid threats. Luckily, there are lots of positive aspects of traceability also. It's a very good tool for labor or cost reduction. You can avoid repunching of data, get more optimal production, better industrial statistics. You can use it in your communication in the chain, profile products with desirable characteristics, and get feedback loops. And what we've seen more and more in the later years is traceability as a competitive advantage, integration of systems. As I've said, I've worked in this field in 15 years, and there's certainly been a shift. When we started working, the focus was very much on the threat and risk on this side. When we went to a food company, for instance, a fish processing plant, we would talk to the production manager about traceability. In recent years, say like 5-6 years ago, the shift has been more over to this area here, especially down with respect to profiling desirable characteristics and getting a competitive advantage. Now, obviously, the reason why we are all here is this new driver for traceability. This is something that we definitely have noticed in the last few years, that documentation of sustainability, documentation of all these parameters that I showed you previously, has become a very important driver. Because if you have a good traceability system, you can calculate, record the things related to environmental load, you can calculate, food miles is coming, Many supermarkets have now started introducing a scheme where they are on their products displaying food miles to the consumer, so the consumer can see how far the product and its ingredients have traveled to get to you. This is not necessarily the same as CO2 emissions, because sometimes, as we saw from the tomato example, products that has traveled a long way are better on environmental load than those locally grown. But it's still, there's a consumer movement, although a small one, for eating local food, short-traveled food, kortreist mat in Norwegian. This is something that can be calculated, emissions, resource use. When it comes to fishery, there is a very important application of traceability related to legislation, and that is the ability. I mean, basically, we can say that there is a problem that we all know about with respect to what's called IUU fish. IUU means illegal, undeclared, unreported. IUU fish is basically what we normally shortly refer to as blackfish, fish that is outside of the system. Now, this is unfair. This is unfair to the companies who deal only in legally caught and landed fish. So one good application, and one that's definitely growing, is the use of a traceability system to document that your fish is not IUU, to document that this is from a stock that is sustainable, a landing that is documented, a catch that is documented, and a landing that's documented. And finally, what we see is that these sustainability parameters certainly give rise to consumer preference. There is a rising number of consumers who explicitly say and also show when they make their buying decisions that they give a preference for products which have this type of documentation. I'll end by showing you what the biggest challenge is, and this is especially geared towards those of you who are in the industry or in close connection with the industry. Because this is how almost all food production looks. This is a very big and ugly factory. I hope your factory looks better than this, but it's only a diagram, and you produce some sort of food. You call it a batch very often, and you just give it some number. And for you, the batch is one production run, very often one day production of a product. It's done in a specified date and time, and it's done on a specified set of raw materials. And this is fine. Your batch needs to go out to your customers out in the world, and your batch, a day's production, is far too big to be shipped as one unit, so you split it up into smaller uses, pallets or cases in pallets. And when I press the button now, you will see the biggest problem and the biggest challenge with traceability. Because what almost all of you do, and I've visited dozens of factories, is the following. You put your batch number on every single box here. And that is so wrong. And if you do that, you can completely forget about using a traceability system to solve the problems that I just shown you. Because there are two really big problems with this. One is that you're giving the same name to thousands of boxes. These are going to go in 10 different directions on 20 different trucks. There's no way to distinguish this number from this number. And the other problem is that you're giving it a number, this batch 112 number, which is only meaningful to you. Only you know what this number means. There are standards for this, and you should use them. And if you have any ambition related to using a traceability system to solve the problems that we've shown you, what you should do is the following. This is what happens now. Your boxes go on a truck. The truck goes in one direction. Boxes with identical numbers go in another direction. And even some boxes may go a different truck, ending in the same destination.